Okay, we're going to start. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for our third annual Houston MBDA Export Academy. I am Jessica Vasquez, the project coordinator of the Houston MBDA Business Center. Our director, Marshette Turner, and our business advisors are joining us today as well. Houston MBDA wants to assist and help firms to recover from the impact of COVID-19 and find new opportunities overseas. Our Export Academy offers businesses of all sizes and scales the opportunity to attend these free workshops to help you stay competitive in this ever-changing global market. Today, we have an amazing workshop presenter and seasoned professional in the person of Mr. Jason Wilson, who serves as a director of the U.S. Commercial Service Houston. He will speak to us about the importance of the foreign market entry strategy. Mr. Wilson, you may start.
Good morning, everyone. How is my volume level pretty good there?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, my name is Jason Wilson. I am the director of the U.S. Commercial Service Office here in Houston. Earlier in this series, one of the members of my team, Peter Tatteris, joined you all. I think it was about 3 weeks back now to do a presentation on website globalization and digital opportunities, as well as our services overall. And today what I'll present is an overview of our complete service offering and how we work with businesses of all sizes to help them achieve their goals related to accessing global markets and increasing international sales. I'll also open by saying the Global Diversity Export Initiative is our critical priority that we are implementing across the nation and globally, for that matter, with all of our partners overseas that we work with to support minority-owned enterprises, including rural, veterans, and women's-owned enterprises. And just please know that this is a mission and a part of what we're doing that is of the utmost importance for us. So with that, I'll get started, and we'll go to our next slide, which is just a little bit about our brand. I want you to know that the Made in the USA brand is as strong as it's ever been. When you begin to think about your business, your product, and your service overseas, American companies and Made in the USA products are very well received, and we are peerless in that regard. We have a global network. We have 70 offices overseas based in the consulates and embassies, and we have 100 offices here domestically across the United States. And this is the network that we connect with to help businesses like yourselves take next steps to increase international sales. Next slide, please. I know that sometimes it can seem like large, well-established companies are exporting and doing international trade, and those aspects can seem quite daunting and advanced. But please know, 90% or more of the businesses we work with are small businesses. So rest assured that if you are a small business here in the Houston area, that you are the type of company that we work with. Next slide, please.
Yes.
The companies that export, data shows that they do grow faster, they're less likely to go out of business, and it really is something that's compelling when you're thinking about your business model. So for example, you may have strong domestic sales already, and if you're able to add an aspect of international to your portfolio, that in fact could really be beneficial for you and your company. Next slide, please. A little bit about the opportunity. We want you to know that more than 70% of the world's purchasing power is outside the United States, so it's a large market. Next slide, please. And when you think about the percentage of our GDP, our economic activity in the country, only 12% of our... Yes, I'll pause there. Hello? Oh, okay, no problem. I'll carry on. But if there are any questions, please just raise your hand, or I suppose we'll have a dialogue after I do my brief presentation. I'll just share that you'll see, for example, Germany, 47% of their national economy is tied to exporting overseas. In Korea, 44% of their economy is tied to exporting overseas. But at the United States, only 12% of our economy is tied to exporting. Now, I know that means we also have strong purchasing power here in the United States and strong domestic demand, but at the same time, it's also an indication of an opportunity that exists overseas that we can really go out and compete abroad. Next slide, please. Broadly speaking, we have four primary services categories that we offer. And the first is export counseling. This is when you would reach out to me, and then I would determine someone on my team, international trade specialist, to talk with you about your business model. How is it that you've come to choose the market overseas or the country that you are deciding that you want to target with your product or service? Perhaps you'll have 2 or 3 target priority countries, but through a dialogue with trade specialists here in Houston, or perhaps engaging the post overseas, we might come to find that that market isn't quite as ready for your product as you might have thought, and there could be a suggestion for what could be another opportunity. And so it's really an ongoing broad-based dialogue. There could be other sort of trade barriers or trade regulations that are putting downward pressure on your business opportunity, and perhaps pivoting your business model to consider new opportunities is something you would consider. The e-commerce innovation lab, that's a lot of what Peter Tadderis presented a couple weeks ago, thinking about your website. Websites are global for that matter. People are accessing them from around the world, and making sure that they can be understood and translated and leveraged by global consumers is important. So that's part of our export counseling as well. Next slide, please. This brings us to market intelligence. One of my favorite resources we have for someone new to exporting, and even those that are familiar but perhaps haven't been to our website, I would say go to trade.gov and begin by looking at the Country Commercial Guide, which is a free resource. And this has a tremendous amount of information on the foreign markets that you're considering. You might be thinking about doing business in Mexico, China, Turkey, anywhere in the world, Australia. And there is if you go to the trade.gov and search under Country Commercial Guide, you can select any country that you like, and you will find, again, data on market opportunities, customs, local business practices, trade regulations, recommendations. And it's really a good baseline information that you would want to review before you reach out to us, to really just help set the stage for the conversation you have with one of our trade specialists. Going beyond that baseline information, next are products and services that deal with next steps in terms of doing a little market research. Perhaps there is a business community in your foreign market that you would like us to pull and interview and see how viable is your product. And international company profiles are similar to saying, doing a background check, for example. You might need a partner, such as a distributor or a strategic partner or an agent to represent you, and we can do background checks on those companies. Next slide, please. Other things we can do are under our category of business matchmaking. We can talk to companies who are interested in holding events overseas. For example, there are oftentimes trade shows and events overseas, and we could help you promote your company and your goods and services overseas in those markets. We can add you to listings so that when companies or foreign buyers request a list of companies providing the services, you could be included on that list. And again, we can help facilitate the process when you need to find those partners overseas. I'll touch on Gold Key service. Many folks are familiar with that product. And this is something that prior to the pandemic was almost always in person. But since the pandemic and the pivot to virtual that a lot of us have done in recent years, we're able to do Gold Key services which can introduce you virtually to that agent or partner or distributor overseas. And we help set the stage for you to have your negotiation and your business dynamic with them. Please know that we're not actively involved in the deal making and in the negotiation and in securing contracts. That's really up to the businesses themselves to solidify and confirm for themselves. But we set the stage to make sure that you are communicating with viable partners and that you have got the conditions and support of the U.S. government, in this case, the U.S. Commercial Service. And we will help make sure that you have a good opportunity to have a successful negotiation. I see a couple questions pop up, but what I'll do is, in fact, I'll just go ahead and take this one I'll come back to those at the end. Thank you very much for those questions, but I'll finish this next section and then I'll go to questions from there. Commercial diplomacy. That is for companies that want to compete for contracts from foreign governments, compete for and win contracts, and that can be complicated. Sometimes there are issues where payment is an issue or slow to pay by the government, or foreign regulation that is a challenge that is not easy to understand. And you can work with the Commercial Service Advocacy Center, and what they will do is review your case and see if there's something that they can do to help out to resolve the trade dispute with the foreign government. Next is trade events. At trade.gov, if you search for trade missions, you will see a full list of recent and future trade missions that are upcoming. These are really a great opportunity to go to all parts of the world with colleagues and join trade missions that oftentimes will focus on the sector. It could be technology, it could be aerospace, a wide variety of categories. But nonetheless, if you go to trade.gov, our trade missions are listed there, and that's an excellent opportunity. There are fees to participate in these, and they're also competitive. You would have to be vetted and qualified so that when we go overseas, our foreign buyers know that we have all of our U.S. companies are ready to export and are viable, qualified exporters to support the requests from foreign buyers. Lastly, I'll mention trade winds. This is the largest U.S. government-led trade mission that we conduct every year. This year, it's going to be in Southeast Asia in Bangkok, Thailand, March 13th to the 15th. And what this opportunity is the ability to go to a market that is fast growing and have pre-scheduled meetings with U.S. commercial diplomats from 20 countries and have pre-screened buyers, agents, distributors, joint venture partners, and set up one-to-one meetings at that event. The cost for trade winds is $750, and that is just for the registration after you're qualified. Again, it is competitive. Not everyone that applies to go is selected, but if you do apply and you are selected, there is that cost. Plus, you have the challenge of paying for your own airfare and hotels and those accommodations. So it can be expensive. I'm going to finish with sharing a resource with you all on how there might be resources to help support that. While you're in Bangkok, we do have side stops. I'll just quickly mention that there are stops in Singapore, Philippines, and Vietnam. There are additional costs for these as well, but you may say, well, I've always wanted to do this conference in Thailand. That's been an interesting market for me, but really my main primary objective is in Singapore. So for example, you could join the trade mission, join the event and program in Bangkok, and then do the side mission over to Singapore. Would take advantage of being on that side of the world. And lastly, I'll just share that the State Trade Expansion Program STEP, those funds can be used to support your participation in trade missions. So that's likely not new information to you, but just please know that the STEP program offered, I think vetted by the SBA and administered by the state of Texas is another great resource for you. So lastly is my contact information. Again, I'm Jason Wilson. I'm the director at the U.S. Commercial Service Office in Houston. And please don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I'll say I look forward to answering any questions and having a conversation with you this morning.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm going to ask Ms. Deidra and Ms. Tanya to please help me with the questions. If you see any questions in the chat, please ask them to Mr. Wilson.
I can see one of the questions here. The first one is, where can we get more information on the Gold Key program? And what I would say is go to trade.gov. And you know what, maybe what I'll do is I'm going to put some of these things in the chat for us. I think that's probably going to be a good way to share it. But at trade.gov, I'm going to list a hyperlink here now with all of our services. There are fees for our services, but they are modest in nature and I think really good value for what you get. More information on the trade missions is the next question. Let me see if I can go to this page. I'm going to drop that in there, and I'm on a roll now. I'm going to go ahead and share with you the link to Country Commercial Guides. That's my favorite because it's free information, and you'll be really impressed with what we have there.
Okay. Would that be a response to that specific nugget advice for first-time exporters? That link you're giving us?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought us back to that. That's a great question because, I don't mind sharing. I haven't really turned my camera on here. Let's see. If I can do that. For first-time exporters, that's so strange today. I'll get to it eventually, but let's see. I think one of the most common things is coming to the U.S. Commercial Service, perhaps with too much of an open dialogue. Like you want to export, but you haven't narrowed down your market and you haven't come up with what might be your reason for choosing a market or competitive advantage. You have to remember that it's competitive overseas, just like it is opening up a coffee shop downtown Houston. The competition is intense, and similar to financing, let's say a bank is concerned if you're going to be able to pay a loan back. Well, in overseas and international trade dynamics, the concern is, can you deliver the product or service? So it's not just, having a competitive advantage and making sure you have a reason for choosing your markets, but also your past record in sales. What are your current U.S. sales? If you have no sales at all, it doesn't mean that you can't begin exporting, but it is the beginning of an uphill climb. And it means that you're really going to have to demonstrate that you have the industry expertise and the capacity at your organization so that when that foreign buyer buys your product or service, you can deliver overseas. And overseas business can be complicated by politics, voting, elections. The tide can change, regulations can go one way or the other. And so it's really important to, first and foremost, for a first-time exporter, have a key reason why you're choosing your market. Know that they're going to be concerned about your ability to deliver, and really just making sure that you've really thought through all the things that can come up and be a challenge in that dynamic.
Okay, that's awesome. I know that in other governmental agencies, they have a mentor protege program. Is there anything like that or similar to that in the trade?
It's a good opportunity for me to share a little bit about our partners that we work with. So your next email can be with myself, to U.S. Commercial Service related to exporting and trade. But if you're not quite ready to export today, that's a good opportunity for us to perhaps consider taking a next step with the MBDA Business Center or a local SBDC. SCORE is a good resource. That's an excellent opportunity. We also have the Houston District Export Council, the Houston DEC here in town, and that is made up of 35 expert exporters and service providers. They're going to do an export university as well coming up in the next few months. And so that's another resource. I would say that the city of Houston has just excellent events, as well as a Greater Houston Partnership. So those are some of our key partners that we work with. To answer your question, we don't have a mentor type program, but we are looking to bring some intern type opportunities. And now I guess I'm getting into vocational a little bit. However, it's an interesting way to learn a little bit about how it works from a U.S. commercial service perspective. I'm not sure it'd be helpful for a business startup, but it is interesting, and it's something I thought would be worth sharing.
Yes, I find that really interesting. Thank you. I see a question. What is the least risky international market strategy for small businesses?
Boy, that is
that's a heavy question.
That's a question I would ask. That is so, and it's a question that it's impossible to answer. So it's almost something we can just talk about. I would start with who are our number one trade partners, Mexico and Canada. Also, distance is a challenge. I mean, it's almost impossible that there's risk in every market. And so I think the key comes down to what is your business model, what's your product or your service, and where is there demand for it? Sometimes there's an excellent business that will come to us, a great product, a great service, and they'll identify a market. and we'll reach out to our embassy or consulate overseas. That's how we really pull together that global network. It's not us trying to figure out what's going on over there. We reach out to the embassy and consulate in that local country, and we say, this is the business opportunity. This is their product or service. How is that market? And sometimes they'll say, this is saturated. There is no chance that any company from a foreign company is going to enter this market. And then you can begin a dialogue if you've done a lot of homework on getting ready to enter that market. Well, that can be an opportunity to maybe pivot to another country. Perhaps it's if you're thinking about Brazil, maybe now it's Argentina or Costa Rica. So there is some flexibility, but there's really no, there really is no market without risk.
Hi, Jason.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. What is the most common misperception about foreign market entry strategy?
Boy, that's a good question too. The most common misconception about foreign market entry strategy, I would say probably just not taking for granted demand, but assuming that there's demand. I mean, that assumption can't be made. So assuming that's demand for your product and service, in other words. So let's say you have tremendous US sales and you're doing great, and you think to yourself, this is going to do fantastic in this particular foreign market. It really requires some due diligence, some research, an initial market check. Again, the country commercial guides are a free resource that can get you a good distance. Maybe then it's a service to find out from local industry leaders what is really going on, boots on the ground. There's also cultural challenges. There are religious and cultural seasonality issues that can be interesting for a first-time buyer that you maybe took into consideration. There may be a way of doing business in terms of a promptness of response, maybe a heavy emphasis on building a relationship, really taking time to understand and get to know someone, the importance of meeting in person if possible. So there can be issues related to the cultural challenges, building a relationship, and maybe a roll up your sleeves, hardworking, cut to the bottom line approach isn't going to be successful overseas always. When you're dealing with a different profile. I just mentioned this a little bit. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Thailand, for example, and the way you would do business there is very relationship oriented. The culture and the food and building relationship and those in-person relationships are critical. You'd probably spend a lot more time on that there than maybe an American might, guess initially. I think sometimes we can be more transactional, but sometimes the relationship needs to be the number one thing you develop first.
Thank you. I have a question about the trade advocacy service. Is there a fee associated with that?
Let me see here. That is an excellent question. You know what? I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. I know I've opened the cases and I've helped companies take next steps, and I'm not entirely sure about that one. So what I'll do is I will find that answer and I'll email that back to you after this conversation this morning.
Thank you.
I understand the STEP program is not actually up and running quite yet. Do you know when they'll be accepting applications?
We were just talking about that yesterday. Unfortunately, I don't know when, but I do think now is the time that applications would normally be going in. So, I don't have an answer for that. We were just trying to figure this out yesterday in our office. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, to be honest. But again, it is a great resource. It can not only help with trade missions, but also the website globalization service that Peter Tadros presented on a couple of weeks ago, and other things. So,
yeah, I think it's kind of a critical part to those trade missions. So that might hold some people up on, participation. But, the trade missions are usually on your website, or they're just various ones? We have to be open to the market to find them.
Well, I did just put a hyperlink in the chat, and there is
Good.
there is a link to the trade missions there, and we update them on a regular basis. In fact, I just put in another link there for the Advocacy Center for frequently asked questions, but I don't see one that asks if there is a fee. So
Okay,
I still gonna have to do my homework on that one, but I did share some information here on advocacy as well.
okay, that'll be awesome.
Good morning, Jason. This is Marshette. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, thanks. Hi, Marshette.
Thank you so much. I apologize for not being on camera and hosting this morning, but I feel absolutely terrible. But I just wanted to thank you for coming on this morning and being a part of the export panel. And thank you so very much. I do appreciate it. Certainly want to thank Jessica and my entire team as well.
Oh, my pleasure, Marshette. One, I hope you feel better soon. But really, it's just working with you and the team of the MBDA Business Center is great. For all of you that maybe don't know, I am new to the office here in Houston. I started in January, but I've been with Department of Commerce for about 6 years. And our working with partners like yourselves and small businesses is really my favorite part of the job. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Thank you. And we certainly appreciate you extending an olive branch to us. When you first came on, you reached out to me. And so I'm thankful for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this can be a standing best practice,
Yes.
like this export program and things you have in the
Mhm.
future and vice
Absolutely.
versa. So, and for you and the companies that you work with, we can certainly invite them to each of our events and really help do the best we can to support the export community.
Wonderful, because I definitely want us to talk more offline about moving forward with our Export Academy.
Mhm.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the funniest thing. I'm looking at a ton of information on advocacy, but no one, no one talks about the fees. I have a feeling that there may not be a fee for this, but I will find the answer and get back to you. I'm disappointed I didn't have it on hand, but I will.
Looks like some people say the screen is freezing, I think, but it hasn't for me.
It is.
I just want them to know maybe it's their connection.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
I'll turn my camera off sometimes. That might free up a little bandwidth.
I have a question for you. There's a question here. Are there any current market trends on your web, the various links that you provided? Is there like a quarterly update on what markets are trending right now? Is that something that our clients can look forward to?
Yeah, that's within the country commercial guides, they will talk about market opportunities and it'll be different. You'll notice when you look at several different countries, the format and how the information is presented is different because each country will have its own profile, but there are a list of market opportunities for each country. And that's updated annually by the officers in the consulate and embassies overseas. So those are regularly updated. And then the trade missions are really, I think, well aligned with emerging opportunities and on trend. So if you see our trade missions and where we're going in those sectors, it's because it's been determined there's a viable opportunity in those markets. So that's a very strong indication as well.
Now, the question that I have, you mentioned that it's important to have relationships, to have built relationships when you start embarking on the trade industry or foreign industry. What would you recommend as far as, you can have domestic experience or whatsoever, but what type of exporting experience can you obtain from within our country, if that makes sense? I mean, how can you, what is the best advice to build up your expertise, or relationships, so on and so on when it comes to the foreign market?
I would say, I'm going to connect that with the question that was asked earlier about what's a common misperception about overseas, which is I think some companies think if they're not ready to export, then they're never going to be ready to export. They sometimes they'll come to us with a kind of a now or never paradigm, but it's not that black and white. I'm thinking of the executive director now at the MBDA Export Center, Lisa Phillip, and she tells her story and talks about how she was thinking about exporting for years and was continuing to get trade and export expertise by doing export universities, gaining your own knowledge on what are the technicalities, the finance, the credit insurance. What would you do to, I know if a foreign buyer didn't pay you, how do you cover that? Are you working with Ex-Im Bank, for example, on credit insurance, or SBA to protect your payment receivables that are due to you? And so I think that along the path there's a few different things that you can improve on over time on an ongoing basis. One is that technical information. Events like today's Export U, the Houston Deck will have an Export U, the events that the City of Houston and Greater Houston Partnership offer. The next then would be building relationships overseas. I think attending a trade show overseas is a great idea, especially if it's aligned with your product and service. So if you've done your advanced homework, your business model is done, perhaps you have US sales, you have indications that there's going to be demand globally for your product or service, maybe try to identify trade shows overseas that are in the sector of your product and service, and consider that as a next step to kind of raise your flag, if you will. And even domestically, perhaps there are trade shows domestically where there are foreign buyers coming inward. Locally in Houston, I know this will be focused on energy, but OTC, the Offshore Technology Conference, is that type of event. But it is, again, energy. It's companies coming to Houston from all around the world. But there are other events. I mean, Las Vegas has no shortage of trade show events with buyers from all over the world, and even just up the road in Austin, Texas, at their South by Southwest event, although that's kind of its own, celebrity and media hoopla thing now. That's a whole nother level beyond just the old tried and true trade show. That's quite a spectacular event nowadays. But that trade shows are a good opportunity as well.
You had some good information.
I had a question. I was wondering if your office do any type of workshops or collaboration with Port Houston?
Thank you so much for asking that question. I'm actually in touch with them currently on trying to develop something. So
okay.
I think Port Houston and Greater Houston Partnership are just tremendous partners. The Houston airport system as well, when you consider all three of the airports in the Greater Houston area.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our most common partners are, again, MBDA Business Center, SBA, Ex-Im Bank, but Port Houston is a partner we've reached out to recently, and I think that very soon, within the next 30 days or so, I bet you we have something together for maybe a 1 day, maybe a half day in-person event, and I'll be sure to share that with you and everyone here
Yes.
on the call.
Absolutely. We would love to spread the news. That'd be a great opportunity. Thank you. We will be sharing the PowerPoint and the recording with everyone who's participating. And I think there's one question we may have missed. Are there local companies already exporting that look to partner with other local companies? And if so, how do we identify those?
That's
like a B2B kind of thing, business to business connection to, go after some of these things.
I would say in that regard, consider leveraging just the local business events and networking, maybe, events that are hosted over at the ION, Rice University at the Innovation District there, or there are quite a few incubators and accelerators that are developing their products and services. Business competition pitches, things that are also hosted by universities, could be Rice or University of Houston, or even, I would imagine, HCC has its own business competition and things like that. I'm not sure. I'm just guessing
Yes,
there,
we
but I
do.
would be surprised if they don't.
We do. Mhm.
So I would say those are good opportunities. It comes down to networking, and but not networking just for the sake of it, but really focused on, I'll harken back to my Peace Corps time. We call it intentional relationship building. It's really not just going to all these things that just kind of a shotgun approach. It's really thinking about your sector, your product, your service, what type of event has the profile of people doing the things that you want to do, and attending those events and building relationships. And you can gain best practices from them, potentially partnerships, and things like that. But I think that being strategic here locally is a good way to go with, business conferences, business pitch plans, and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Do anybody else have any more questions? I'm looking, I'm not sure. Don't seem to have missed any. Okay. Jason, is there anything you'd like to add? Maybe something that's generic to everybody who's participating, beginners as well as active exporters?
Well, I think what I would share is that I mentioned how we all pivoted to more of a virtual platform since the pandemic. But I think we're also feeling the trend and interest to get back out there in person, excited, to meet people again and go to in-person events. But maybe the best practice going forward or an opportunity is really to continue to blend the two at your business's benefits. So, for example, a lot of our economic opportunities have pivoted to e-commerce. So I think that thinking about your website and Peter's presentation is going to be critical. You can do a lot of your initial meetings and events and coverage virtually. But just remember that eventually and ultimately, perhaps you're going to, need to build those in-person relationships, and particularly overseas. And I think that I would say above all else, if there's one thing that stands out, it's really just choosing a market based on maybe you have family ties to a country, or you have a language skill, or you've spent a lot of time there, or you're just, perhaps it's not that side that gives you the competitive advantage. Perhaps you're an engineer and you develop the product and you're really just technically proficient. You know how you have a product and the country just has the demand for it. So it doesn't always have to be cultural or relationship. It could be about your product, your service, your technical skills. It could be anything, but really just making sure that you have a competitive advantage or a real strong case, a good reason for choosing your overseas market. And if that's your first step, then after that, you got to stay flexible. You got to be open to finding out maybe that market opportunity exists or it doesn't. You could work with the trade specialists at CS Houston, and maybe they could advise on perhaps another opportunity. But you can continue to leverage all the hard work you've done and maybe apply it to a different market, and just continue to be flexible and iterate and improve along the way.
I think those are great closing remarks, Jason. Thank you so much again. I truly do appreciate you being with us this morning and taking the time to present to our guests. As Jessica said, we will certainly make the presentation available to everyone on the call. So with that being said, thank you so much again, Jason, and everyone have a phenomenal morning.